solve equations that are mixed exponentials and polynomials, we want to think about taking out GCFs to solve if possible. So example 22, 3 to the x times 5x minus 10 times 3 to the x. Both of those terms share a 3x, so we can actually factor out that exponential 3 to the x from both terms. That would give us just 5x in the first term and minus 10 from the second term. And that's set equal to 0. So now 3 to the x, if you think about the graph of the exponential, the range is always positive. So it's always a positive number. That's because the range is 0 to infinity or y greater than 0. So what that means is that this first part is never going to be negative, and it's never going to be 0 either. So this part of the equation is not going to give us an answer to this problem that's set equal to 0. So we can ignore that first part. And we can just solve the second part by setting it equal to 0. So set 5x minus 10 equal to 0. We would add 10 to both sides. We get 5x equals 10, and then divide by 5 to get x equals 2. And that x equals 2 would be the only solution to this equation, again, because this exponential part cannot ever be equal to 0 to make this equation true. Okay. Example 23, x squared e to the x minus 10x e to the x equals 0. We can do the same thing and factor out the GCF, so factor out an e to the x from these two terms. Then we'd have x squared from the first term minus 10x from the second term equals 0. And then this middle part we can factor again by taking out a GCF of x. So then we'd have e to the x, take out a GCF of x, and then we would have x minus 10 remaining. So now to solve this, we'd think about setting each of these pieces equal to 0. So e to the x equals 0. For this first part, x equals 0 for the second piece there, and then x minus 10 equals 0 for this third part. However, e to the x, just like 3 to the x, that function would always be positive. So this e to the x equals 0 is never going to have a solution. So one of our solutions then is from this middle piece, x equals 0, and our other solution is from solving x minus 10 equals 0. So we would add 10 to both sides to get x equals 10. Okay. The other way to solve problems like these, I'm just going to rewrite it, x squared e to the x minus 10x e to the x equals 0, is you can move this term to the other side by adding it to both sides. Then you'd have x squared e to the x equals 10x e to the x. And then since e to the x is never 0, you can divide both sides by e to the x, which ends up canceling it out from both sides. Then you have x squared equals 10x. And then solving that equation, you just have a quadratic. So you'd have x squared, if you move the 10x over, minus 10x equals 0, which would be x times x minus 10 when you factor out a GCF, which gives x equals 0 for this solution and x equals 10 for this solution, which are the same ones that you get by doing it this fully factored method. But just note it's possible to divide out the e to the x or an e or e to something else if it's shared on both sides, because that term is never 0. You can divide it out when you're solving.